A thick fog blankets Baker Street, swallowing the flicker of gaslights. In a shadowed room, a syringe gleams beside a worn violin, its needle promising escapor ruin. Sherlock Holmes, the mind that pierces London's darkest mysteries, harbors a secret more deadly than any killer he's faced. In the sign of the Four, a poison runs through his veins, while a cursed treasure and a silent assassin lurk in the shadows. These truths could end the great detective forever. Dare you uncover the secrets that haunt him? Step into the mist for 10 gripping tales of danger, deception, and the darkness within the legend of 2-1B. Join us now and let the hunt begin. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the cluttered room at 2-1B Baker Street. The air hung heavy with the scent of tobacco and old books, but something sharper cut through a faint metallic tang that made Dr. John Watson's stomach twist. He stood by the window, his cane tapping softly against the floor, watching the fog swirl outside like a living thing. London was restless tonight, but not half as restless as the man sprawled in the armchair across the room. Sherlock Holmes was a study in contradictions, his lean frame draped languidly over the worn leather. Yet his fingers twitched with a feverish energy. His eyes, usually sharp as steel, were half-lidded, gazing at nothing. Its lid open to reveal a syringe and a small glass bottle glinting in the firelight. Watson's jaw tightened. He knew that bottle to well cocaine, Holmes' 7% solution. The poison he turned to when the world grew too dull for his brilliant mind. Holmes, Watson said, his voice steady but laced with concern, you've not eaten in days. Instead, he reached for the syringe, his movements slow and deliberate, like a priest preparing a sacrament. He tapped the syringe against the bottle, a soft clink echoing in the quiet room. This keeps the machine running when there's nothing else to feed it. No cases, no puzzles, just the intolerable monotony of existence. Watson stepped forward, his boots creaking on the floorboards. It's poison, Holmes, he said, his voice rising. Holmes finally met Watson's gaze, his eyes glinting with a dangerous spark. And what would you have me do, Watson? He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the room. The world is gray without it. This is color. Thieves, choosing a slow death in the heart of London. Holmes paused, the syringe hovering over his skin. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, doubt, perhaps, or longing. But then he shook his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. You don't understand, Watson. The world is gray without it. This is color. Before Watson could reply, Holmes pressed the needle to his vein. The plunger sank, and a sigh escaped him, soft and shuddering, as if the world had righted itself. This was a secret too deadly to keep. The great detective, who saw through every lie, was blind to the one that could destroy him. The room fell silent, save for the fire's soft hiss. Holmes sank deeper into the chair, his face slackening, his eyes drifting to the ceiling. Watson watched him, torn between anger and pity. He'd seen Holmes defy death before, dodging bullets, outsmarting killers, but this was a foe he couldn't outrun. Cocaine was no mere vice. It was a thief, stealing Holmes' strength, his clarity, his life. And yet, Watson knew it was also the spark that kept Holmes' mind ablaze when the world offered no mysteries. Outside, Watson moved to the desk, his fingers brushing the morocco case. He could hide it, destroy it, but what then? Holmes would find another way: opium, morphine, some new poison to chase the shadows from his mind. No, the only cure was a case, something to pull him from the abyss, as if the fates had heard him. A sound broke the silencer, sharp rap at the door downstairs. Watson froze, glancing at Holmes, who stirred faintly, followed by a softer tread, hesitant but purposeful. A visitor at this hour meant trouble always. "Did, Holmes?" Watson said, turning to him. "Someone's here." Holmes' eyes sharpened, the haze of cocaine giving way to a glint of curiosity. He set the syringe down, his voice low and eager. The door swung open, and Mrs. Hudson stepped inside, her face a mix of concern. "A young lady, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice tight. "Miss Mary Morstan. She insists on seeing you. Seems proper distressed. Poor thing." Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepling beneath his chin. "Distressed, you say?" he murmured, a smile flickering at his lips. "Well then, show her in." As Mrs. Hudson vanished back into the hall, Watson felt a flicker of hope. A case, perhaps the one to save Holmes from himself. But as the soft footsteps drew closer, he couldn't shake the chill that settled in his bones. Her trouble, whatever it was, carried the scent of danger, and Holmes, still trembling from his poison, was stepping into it blind. The Thames was a ribbon of black glass under the moonless sky, its surface rippling with the secrets it kept. Fog hung low, curling like ghostly fingers around the docks, where the stench of tar and rotting wood clung to the air. A steam launch cut through the water, its engine a low, urgent pulse, carrying 3 men toward a destiny none could foresee. At the bow stood Sherlock Holmes, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness, his coat flapping in the chill wind. Dr. John Watson gripped the rail beside him, his revolver heavy in his pocket, while Inspector Jones steered, cursing under his breath. At the murk that hid their quarry, Holmes' face was taut, his mind racing faster than the boat. Hours earlier, in the gaslit warmth of Baker Street, Miss Mary Morstan had spun a tale of loss and mystery. Her father vanished, a treasure promised, and strange gifts of pearls arriving yearly. Her quiet courage had stirred something in Holmes, a flicker of purpose that pulled him from the haze of his syringe. Now the trail led here, to the river's edge, where a killer fled with the key to her sorrow. "There ahead, Holmes," Watson whispered, squinting into the fog. "That boat there, by the wharf. I saw a light." Holmes nodded, his gaze fixed on a faint flicker bobbing in the distance. "Jonathan Small," he murmured, almost to himself. "A man with blood on his hands and a fortune in his grasp. But he's not alone, Watson. There's another, a shadow at his side." Watson frowned, straining to see. The fugitive's boat was a smudge against the riverbank, its outline blurred by mist. 2 figures moved aboard, one tall and frantic, the other smaller, hunched, unnaturally swift. A chill crawled up Watson's spine, though he couldn't say why. Holmes leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. "Stay sharp, Watson. This is no ordinary chase. Small's companion is no common thug. He's something else." Watson's hand tightened on his revolver, his war-honed instincts prickling. He'd faced death before Afghan snipers, London cutthroats, but this felt different, like stepping into a trap woven from darkness itself. Holmes, though, seemed alive with the thrill, his eyes glinting like a predator's. The cocaine's shadow lingered in his trembling hands, but his mind was a blade, honed and hungry. "Closer, Jones," Holmes called, his voice cutting through the damp air. The inspector grumbled but pushed the throttle, narrowing the gap. The fugitive's boat loomed clearer now, its lantern swaying wildly as Small wrestled with the tiller. Beside him, the smaller figure darted to the stern, a silhouette against the water's sheen. Watson caught a glimpse, lithe, barely human in its speed, clutching something in its hand. "What the devil is that?" Watson muttered, his breath clouding in the Tonga, he said, the name falling like a stone. Before Watson could ask more, a faint hiss sliced the air, sharp and unnatural. Holmes lunged, shoving Watson to the deck as something small and dark whizzed. Watson scrambled up, heart pounding, and saw it a slender dart, its tip glistening with a sickly sheen. A soldier's death, swift and merciless. "Down," Holmes hissed, yanking Jones behind the helm. Another hiss, another dart, this one grazing the inspector's sleeve before vanishing into the river. Jones cursed, his face pale, but Holmes was already moving, his revolver drawn, eyes locked on the fleeing boat. "Tonga's blowpipe," Holmes said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "One scratch, Watson, and we're done." "He's small, but he's a devil silent, precise, and loyal to Small's cause." Watson peered over the rail, his revolver raised. The fog parted briefly, revealing Tonga at the stern, his blowpipe gleaming as he loaded another dart. His eyes, dark and unblinking, met Watson's across the water, and for a moment time froze. There was no malice in that gaze, only a cold, animal focus, as if death were a task to be done. Then the fog closed again, and Tonga vanished. "Holmes, we can't outrun those darts," Watson said, his voice tight. "We're sitting ducks." Holmes' jaw clenched, his mind racing. "We don't outrun them," he said. "We outthink them. Small's boat is slower, laden with his prize. He'll make for the docks there, by the old warehouse. If we cut them off." A third dart hissed past, splintering the launch's prow. Watson fired blindly into the fog, the shot echoing uselessly. Holmes grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Save your bullets, Watson. We'll need them when we close the gap." Jones steered hard, the launch veering toward the riverbank. Holmes crouched low, his revolver steady, watching the shadows for Tonga's next move. "Did you know," Watson asked, reloading his gun, "about this?" "Tonga?" Holmes' eyes flicked to him, sharp and haunted. "The Andaman Islands, Watson. A penal colony, a place of exile. Small's story his limp, his years abroad pointed to it. And where men like Small go, they find others like Tonga. Men who kill without question, bound by loyalty or fear. Watson. He's not a man, he's a phantom." Holmes' lips twitched, almost a smile. "Phantoms bleed, Watson, and we'll make this one bleed." The launch surged closer, the warehouses, rotting piers now in sight. Small's boat slowed, its engine sputtering as it neared the dock. Tonga leaped ashore, agile as a cat, his blowpipe raised. Holmes stood, his coat billowing, and fired a shot that splintered the pier beside the islander. Tonga flinched, but didn't fall, vanishing into the shadows of the warehouse after them. Holmes shouted, leaping onto the dock as the launch scraped against it. Watson followed, his boots slipping on the slick wood, Jones close behind. The fog was thicker here, swallowing sound and sight. Somewhere ahead, Small's heavy footsteps echoed, mingled with the soft patter of Tonga's. Holmes paused, his head cocked, listening. "They're splitting up," he whispered. "Small's heading for the street, but Tonga, he's circling back." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. The warehouse loomed like a tomb, its broken windows staring blindly. A faint rustle came from the left, then silence. Watson's heart thundered, every nerve screaming danger. Holmes raised a hand, signaling caution, then moved forward, silent as a specter. A hiss broke the quiet, and Watson dove, rolling behind a crate as a dart struck where he'd stood. Holmes spun, firing into the darkness, the shot ringing in the fog. A shadow darted between barrel-stanga, his blowpipe flashing. Watson fired, the bullet sparking off metal, and the islander melted back into the gloom. He's toying with, he's protecting Small, but he's made a mistake, he's shown himself. The air in the warehouse was thick with the reek of damp wood and coal dust, a cavern of shadows where the fog from the Thames seeped through broken windows. Sherlock Holmes crouched behind a splintered crate, his revolver a cold weight in his hand, his eyes scanning the darkness. Dr. John Watson knelt beside him, his breath shallow, ears straining for the faint patter of Tonga's footsteps. The Andaman islander had vanished into the gloom, his poisoned darts a silent promise of death. But Holmes' mind was elsewhere, piecing together a puzzle that began not here, but years ago, in a far-off land under a burning sun. The chase on the Thames had led them to this moment, pursuing Jonathan Small, a man with a limp and a secret worth killing for. Holmes' voice was a low whisper, barely audible over the creak of the warehouse's timbers. "Small's not just running, Watson. He's guarding something a truth bound in blood. We're close, but he's desperate, and desperate men are." Deadly Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, his war-scarred nerves taut. "What truth, Holmes? What's worth all this darts, chases, murder?" Holmes' eyes glinted, sharp as a blade. "A pact, Watson. 4 men, 1 treasure, and an oath that turned them into killers. It's the heart of this case, and why Small will stop at nothing." The story shifts, the shadows of the warehouse dissolving into a haze of heat and dust. Years earlier, in the scorched plains of India, 4 men stood in a circle under a moonlit sky. Jonathan Small, his face weathered, his leg scarred from a crocodile's bite, held a small iron box, its surface etched with strange symbols. Beside him stood Captain Morstan, Mary's father, his officer's uniform stained with sweat. 2 others completed the circle, a burly Sikh, his turban gleaming, and a wiry Englishman with a nervous twitch. "This is ours," Small said, his voice rough, gripping the box. "The Agra treasured diamonds, pearls, gold enough to make us kings, but we swear it now. Equal shares, or death to the traitor." Morstan's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with doubt. "An oath, Small. We're thieves now, not soldiers. This treasure's cursed already." The Sikh's hand rested on his dagger, his voice low and steady. "Cursed or not, it's ours. Swear it, or you'll not leave this circle." The Englishman's fingers trembled, but he nodded, his voice a rasp. "I swear. By blood and blade, I swear." Small drew a knife, its blade catching the moonlight, and nicked his palm. Blood welled, dark and glistening. One by one, the others followed, their hands meeting in a solemn grip, the iron box at the center, equal shares, small, intoned or death. No man breaks this oath. The scene fades, the Indian night giving way to the warehouse's chill. Holmes crept forward, his boots silent on the damp floor. Watson followed, his heart pounding, the memory of Tonga's dart still fresh. The warehouse was a maze of crates and rusted machinery, each corner hiding a potential ambush. But Holmes' mind was on the past, piecing together the threads Mary Morstan had laid before them, her father's disappearance. He swore the oath, but he broke it, tried to. Holmes' lips pressed thin because the treasures surfaced. But he's not alone. Tonga's loyalty is his weapon, and that oath binds them both to kill. Watson peered into the shadows, catching a glimpse of movement, a limping figure, dragging a heavy sack, small. But where was Tonga? The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water and the distant lap of the Thames. Holmes motioned toward a narrow passage between crates, his voice a hiss. Smalls heading for the street. He thinks he's slipped us, but he's wrong. Stay close, Watson, and watch the shadows. They moved swiftly, weaving through the maze. Watson's boots scraped softly, his eyes darting to every corner. The memory of India lingered, the oath's weight pressing on him. For men, bound by greed, had turned on each other, and now their sins haunted London. Morstan's death murder, Holmes had implied, had set this chain in motion, and Mary, innocent and brave, was caught in its coils. A sudden clatter broke the quiet metal striking wood. Holmes spun, his revolver aimed, as a figure stumbled into view. It was small, his face haggard, his wooden leg thudding against the floor. Watson realized. The Agra treasure itself, small. Holmes called, his voice sharp as a whip. It's over. Drop the sack and face me. Small froze, his eyes wild, darting toward the warehouse's exit. You don't know what you're meddling with, Holmes, he growled, his voice thick with defiance. This is mine, my right. You've killed for it, Small. Morstan, others, how many? Small's lips curled into a sneer. Morstan was a fool. Broke the oath, thought he could cheat us. The others learned the same lesson. And you, he jabbed a finger at Holmes, you're next if you don't back off. He glanced upward, toward the warehouse's rafters, and Watson's blood ran cold. The shadows above shifted, a faint glint betraying movement. Tonga perched like a predator, his blowpipe ready. Holmes, Watson shouted, shoving him aside, as a dart hissed down, striking the crate where Holmes had stood. Splinters flew, and Watson fired upward, the shot echoing through the warehouse. A shadow leaped, swift and silent, vanishing into the darkness. Small seized the moment, bolting for the exit, the sack dragging behind him. Holmes sprang to his feet, his coat swirling, and gave chase, Watson at his heels. The warehouse's walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the promise of death. Small's limp slowed him, but Tonga's darts were a specter. Lurking in every shadow, they burst onto the street, the fog swallowing them in an instant. Small's figure was a blur, his wooden leg a rhythmic thud against the cobblestones. Holmes ran like a hound, his eyes locked on the fugitive, but Watson's gaze darted upward, searching for Tonga. The islander was out there, a silent killer, bound too small by the same oath that had birthed this nightmare. Holmes skidded to a halt, his breath clouding in the cold. He's heading for the docks, he said, his voice low and fierce. "The treasure's his anchor, Watson. It slows him, but it drives him. We'll have him yet." Watson nodded, his revolver still raised, but his heart sank. The oath that bound Small and his conspirators was a curse, its tendrils reaching across years and continents. Holmes was unraveling it, step by step, but at what cost? The warehouse had been a trap, and the streets were no safer. Tonga's darts could strike at any moment, and Small's desperation made him a cornered beast. The fog clung to the cobblestones of London's docks, a grey shroud that swallowed sound and sight. Sherlock Holmes moved like a shadow, his keen eyes fixed on the limping figure ahead. Jonathan Small's wooden leg thudded against the slick stones, the sack slung over his shoulder clinking with every step-a-siren's song of gold and gems. The Agra treasure that had cost so many lives. Dr. John Watson followed close behind, his revolver drawn, his breath clouding in the chill air. The memory of Tonga's poisoned dart lingered, a whisper of death in the darkness. But Holmes' focus was unyielding, drawn to the treasure that bound this tale of blood and betrayal. Small's silhouette vanished around a corner into an alley, where the stench of fish and tar hung heavy. Holmes paused, his hand raised to signal caution. "He's slowing, Watson," he whispered, his voice low and taut. "The treasure's weight is his chain, but he'll fight like a cornered beast to keep it." Watson's jaw tightened, his gaze darting to the rooftops, where Tonga might lurk. "This treasure," he muttered, "it's no prize, it's a curse. Morstan, the others dead because of it. And now us, chasing it through this fog." Holmes' lips twitched, a flicker of a smile. "Curses are for poets, Watson. But greed is real, and it kills. That sack holds more than gold. It holds the truth of this case." The story shifts, the fog parting to reveal a moonlit courtyard in India years before. The air was thick with heat, the buzz of insects mingling with the distant wail of a jackal. 4 men huddled around a flickering fire, their faces etched with greed and fear. Jonathan Small clutched the iron box, its lid open to reveal a dazzling hoard, diamonds like frozen stars, pearls smooth as moonlight, gold coins stamped with forgotten kings. Captain Morstan's eyes widened, his fingers trembling as he reached out, only to draw back. "This is wealth beyond dreams," Morstan said, his voice hushed. "But it's stolen, Small. The Rajah's treasure taken in blood during the siege. It'll bring us nothing but grief." Small's laugh was harsh, his scarred face twisting. "Grief. It's our salvation, man. Years in this hellhole prison, and now this. We swore the oath equal shares, you backing out now." The Sikh, his dagger glinting, shook his head. "No one backs out. This gold is ours, but it demands loyalty. Betray it, and you betray us all." The 4th man, the wiry Englishman, licked his lips, his eyes glued to the gems. "It's ours," he rasped, "but we hide it. No one must know, not yet. Too many eyes watching." Small nodded, slamming the box shut. "We hide it deep in Agra's ruins. When we're free, we claim it. But mark this," he met each man's gaze, his voice a growl. "This treasure is ours, and death to any who breaks the bond." The fire spat, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe like specters. The treasure's glow had sealed their Fate's a curse disguised as gold, its promise of wealth a noose around their necks. The London alley snapped back into focus, the fog swirling as Holmes and Watson crept forward. The clink of Small's sack was fainter now, but his trail was clear a scuff of mud, a splintered crate where he'd stumbled. The docks were a labyrinth of narrow lanes and rotting sheds, each turn hiding danger. Watson's boots slipped on, a patch of oil, and he steadied himself against a wall, his heart racing. "Holmes," he whispered, "this treasure—it's why Morstan vanished, isn't it?" He tried to take it or hide it. Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the alley's mouth. Morstan was the weak link. He wanted out, perhaps to protect his daughter, but Small never forgives a traitor. That's why Mary's pearls come yearly a taunt, a reminder of the oath he broke. Watson's thoughts turned to Mary Morstan, her pale face in Baker Street's firelight, her voice steady despite her fear. She'd spoken of her father's letters, his promises of wealth, then silence. The treasure had torn her life apart before she was old enough to understand it. And now Holmes was plunging into its jaws to set her free. A sudden thud echoed ahead, followed by a muffled curse. Holmes darted forward, Watson at his heels, rounding the corner to find Small sprawled on the cobblestones, the sack spilled open. Jewels glittered in the dim gaslight rolls, rubies, a single pearl rolling toward the gutter. Small scrambled to gather them, his face a mask of desperation. "Stay back," he snarled, drawing a knife, its blade catching the light. "This is mine, my right." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver leveled, his voice calm but unyielding. "You're right, Small. It's bought with blood. Morstan's, your comrades. How many died for that gold?" Small's eyes blazed, his grip tightening on the knife. "They betrayed me." The oath was clerical. Shares. Morstan hid it, thought he could cheat us. I found him, made him pay, and I'll not let you take what's left. Watson raised his revolver, his voice steady. "It's over, Small. Drop the knife, or we end this here." Small's gaze darted between them, his breath ragged. The treasure lay scattered at his feet, its glow mocking him. For a moment, Watson thought he'd surrender, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years and guilt. But then a faint hiss cut the air, sharp and deadly, and Watson's instincts took over. "Holmes, down," he shouted, tackling Holmes to the ground as a dart streaked past, embedding itself in the wall behind them. Tonga, the islander, was near, his blowpipe a specter in the fog. Small seized the chance, scooping the jewels into the sack and bolting down the alley. His wooden leg a frantic rhythm, Holmes sprang up, his coat swirling, and fired a shot after Small, the bullet sparking off the stones. "After him, Watson," he called, already running. Watson followed, his lungs burning, the dart's poison a chilling reminder of Tonga's reach. The alley twisted, opening onto a wider street where gaslights flickered, casting long shadows. Small was ahead, his limp slowing him, the sack dragging like an anchor. But the fog was thickening, and Tonga's presence was a weight on Watson's nerves. Holmes' face was grim, his mind racing. "The treasure's his weakness," he said, his voice low. "He won't abandon it, not after all he's done. But it's also his trap." They rounded another corner, the street giving way to a derelict pier, its timbers rotting into the Thames. Small was there, fumbling with a small boat tied to the dock, the sack at his feet. He glanced back, his face pale, and Watson saw fear in his eyes, not of them, but of something else. Holmes, Watson panted, slowing. He's not alone. Tonga's out there, watching. Holmes nodded, his revolver raised, scanning the fog. Tonga's bound too small, Watson, as much as that oath bound the four. But loyalty has its limits. Small's desperation may be his undoing. Small shoved the boat into the water, heaving the sack aboard. He turned, knife in hand, his voice a desperate plea. "Leave me be, Holmes. You don't know what this cost me, years, blood, everything." Holmes stepped closer, his voice cutting through the fog. "I know, Small. I know the treasures. Curse how it turns men into monsters, but you can't outrun it, not anymore." A shadow flickered on the pier's edge, swift. Watson's heart stopped, his revolver swinging toward it, but it was gone before he could fire. Tonga, always Tonga, the oath's deadly enforcer. Small froze, his eyes darting to the shadows, and Watson realized the truth. The treasure wasn't just Small's prize, it was his prison, and Tonga was its keeper. The Thames lapped at the rotting pier, its dark waters whispering secrets as thick fog curled around the splintered timbers. Sherlock Holmes stood motionless, his revolver trained on Jonathan Small, whose silhouette wavered in the dim glow of a gaslight. The fugitive's wooden legs scraped against the dock, the sack of the Agra treasure at his feet, its contents spilling jewels that gleamed like cursed stars. Dr. John Watson clutched his own revolver, his heart pounding, his eyes darting to the shadows where Tonga, the silent assassin, might lurk with his deadly darts. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and fear, and the weight of a choice that would define this night. Small's knife glinted in his hand, his face a mask of defiance and desperation. "You can't take it, Holmes," he rasped, his voice raw. "This treasure's mine, paid for in blood, in years of chains. You'll have to kill me to stop me." Holmes' eyes were cold, unyielding, like the river itself. "Blood, Small," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Morstan's blood. Your comrades, how many died for your greed?" Watson stepped closer, his revolver steady, but his gaze flickered to Holmes. He'd seen that look before the detective's mind, a machine, calculating, detached. It was the look that unraveled mysteries, but tonight it chilled Watson's bones. The chase had led them here, through London's fog and Tonga's darts, to a moment where justice hung by a thread. But what kind of justice would Holmes choose? "Holmes," Watson said, his voice tight, "he's cornered. We can take him alive. The law can deal with him." Holmes didn't turn, his revolver unwavering. "The law, Watson. The law is slow, and Small is slippery. He's killed before, and he'll kill again. The treasure's curse runs through him." Small's laugh was bitter, his knife trembling. "Curse? You're a fool, Holmes. It's power freedom. You think you're above it, but you're just another man chasing shadows." The words hung in the air, and Watson saw a flicker in Holmes' expression, not anger, but something colder, a resolve that sent a shiver down his spine. He'd followed Holmes through danger, from Baker Street's firelight to this desolate pier, trusting his friend's genius. But now, as the fog thickened and Tonga's threat lingered, Watson wondered if he truly knew the man beside him. The story shifts, the pier fading to a memory of earlier that night, in a cramped attic room where Holmes had pieced together the final threads of the case. Papers littered the table, maps, letters, a scrap of newsprint about an Indian rebellion. Mary Morstan sat across from them, her hands clasped, her face pale but resolute. She'd spoken of her father, Captain Morstan, and the pearls that arrived each year, a ghostly echo of a promise broken. Holmes had listened, his fingers steepled, his eyes distant, but Watson had seen the spark of revelation. "It's clear now," Holmes had said, his voice a quiet blade. "The treasure was hidden, but Small found it. He killed to reclaim it, and he'll kill to keep it. Morstan's death was no accident, it was the price of betrayal." Mary's voice trembled, but her gaze held steady. "My father. He wanted to protect me, didn't he, to keep me from this?" Holmes nodded, his expression softening for a moment. "He did, Miss Morstan. But the oath he swore bound him to men like Small, and now it binds us to end this." Watson had watched Holmes then, noting the shift in his tone, not compassion, but determination, as if the case were a puzzle to be solved at any cost. He'd seen Holmes defy death, outwit killers, but there was a hardness in him now, a willingness to cross a line Watson feared to name. The pier snapped back into focus, the fog swirling as Small took a step back, his knife raised. Watson's heart raced, his mind torn between duty and dread. He'd fought beside Holmes, trusted him, but this moment felt different. Small was a murderer, yes, but he was a man, cornered and broken. Watson's war years had taught him mercy, even for the guilty. Did Holmes feel the same? "Holmes," Watson said, stepping closer, "we've got him. Let the courts decide his fate." "You don't need to." Holmes cut him off, his voice like ice. "Justice, Watson, is not always a courtroom. Small's crimes are written in blood. Morstan's, his comrades. If he escapes, more will die. You know this." Watson's grip faltered, his revolver dipping slightly. He saw the truth in Holmes' words, but also the danger. A man who judged life and death with such certainty walked a perilous path. Small's eyes darted between them, sensing the tension. The treasure lay at his feet, its glow a mocking reminder of the oath that had brought them here. "Listen to your friend, Holmes," Small said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Take me in. I'll face the gallows, but don't play God. You're no better than me." Holmes' gaze didn't waver, his revolver steady. "I'm not like you, Small. You killed for greed. I seek truth, and sometimes truth demands a price." The words hung heavy, and Watson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the fog. He'd seen Holmes' brilliance, his ability to see through lies. But this was different, a coldness that weighed justice against mercy and found the latter wanting. The Thames lapped at the pier, its rhythm a heartbeat counting down to a choice that could change everything. A faint hiss broke the silence, sharp and deadly. Watson's instincts flared, and he shoved Holmes aside as a dart streaked from the fog, grazing the sleeve of his coat. Tonga. The islander was near, his blowpipe a specter in the shadows. Small seized the moment, grabbing the sack and stumbling toward the boat, its hull rocking against the pier. "Holmes!" Watson shouted, firing blindly into the fog. The shot echoed, answered by the thud of Small's wooden leg as he climbed aboard. Holmes sprang up, his revolver raised, but his eyes were on Small, not the shadows where Tonga hid. "Leave him, Watson," Holmes said, his voice calm but commanding. "The treasure's his noose. Let him hang himself." Watson froze, his revolver still raised. "What are you saying, Holmes?" We can't let him go, he's a killer. Holmes' gaze was unreadable, a storm behind his calm. Sometimes, Watson, the trap is already set. Small's greed will bind him tighter than any rope. But Tonga, he scanned the fog, his voice dropping. Tonga's the real danger now. The boat's engine sputtered to life, Small's silhouette fading into the mist. Watson's heart sank, torn between chasing the fugitive and heeding Holmes' words. The detective's choice was clear. He'd let Small run, trusting the treasure's curse to finish what they'd started. Moreover, it wasn't just tactics. It was a choice that spoke of a deeper, colder resolve. Watson had seen it in battle, the look of a man who'd decided the end before the fight began. The fog closed in, swallowing the boat's faint outline. Watson lowered his revolver, his voice hoarse. "Holmes, you let him go. After the murders, what if he escapes?" Holmes turned, his face shadowed. "He won't, Watson. The river knows his secrets, and so do I. But first, we deal with the shadow." The Thames churned under a starless sky, its black waters a mirror for the fog that smothered London's docks. The air was sharp with salt and coal, the night alive with the creak of moored boats and the distant wail of a foghorn. Sherlock Holmes stood at the bow of a steam launch, his coat snapping in the wind, his eyes fixed on a faint lantern bobbing ahead. Jonathan Small's boat cut through the river, its engine a desperate growl, carrying the fugitive and his cursed treasure. Dr. John Watson gripped the rail beside Holmes, his revolver cold in his hand, while Inspector Jones steered his face, grim under the weight of the chase. Holmes' voice was low, barely audible over the engine's thrum. "He's making for the open water, Watson. The treasure's his anchor, but the river's his judge. We'll have him yet." Watson's heart pounded, the memory of Tonga's poisoned dart still sharp. On the pier, moments ago, Holmes had let Small slip away, his cold resolve betting on the fugitive's greed to trap him. Now the chase was on again, the Thames a battlefield where one misstep meant death. Watson scanned the fog, his nerves taut, searching for the shadow of the Andaman Islander whose blowpipe could strike without warning. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice tight, "Tonga's out there. One dart, and this chase ends for us." Holmes' eyes didn't waver, locked on Small's boat. "Tonga's a shadow, Watson, but Small's the light that draws him. Stay sharp and keep your eyes on that lantern." The launch surged forward, its prow slicing through the water, narrowing the gap. Small's boat was clearer now, a low, battered craft weighed down by the sack of the Agra treasure. Watson glimpsed Small at the tiller, his face pale and frantic, his wooden leg braced against the deck. Beside him, a smaller figure crouched Tonga, his blowpipe glinting in the lantern's glow, a specter of death in the fog. The river widened, its banks fading into mist, the city's lights mere pinpricks. In the distance, Watson's grip tightened, his war-honed instincts screaming danger. He'd faced ambushes in Afghanistan, but this was different, a chase on a liquid battlefield, where the enemy was both ahead and unseen. Holmes, though, was a hound on the scent, his lean frame taut with purpose. The cocaine's haze burned away by the thrill of the hunt. "Faster, Jones," Holmes called, his voice cutting through the roar of the engine. The inspector pushed the throttle, the launch shuddering as it gained speed. The gap closed, Small's boat now only yards away, its lantern swaying wildly. Watson raised his revolver, aiming for the hull, but Holmes grabbed his arm. "Not yet, Watson," he said, his voice sharp. "We need Small alive, the treasures. The key, but his story unlocks the truth." Watson lowered his gun, his jaw clenched, and Tonga, he won't hesitate to kill us. Holmes' lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Then we don't hesitate either." A sudden hiss split the air, sharp and venomous. Watson ducked, the dart missing his shoulder by inches, striking the launch's rail with a soft thud. Its tip glistened, poison gleaming in the dim light. Watson fired into the fog, the shot echoing uselessly, and Small's boat veered, its engine screaming as it dodged. "Tonga!" Watson shouted, his voice raw. "He's aiming for us." Holmes crouched, his revolver raised, scanning the enemy boat. "He's protecting Small," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "But he's reckless. That's our advantage." The launch surged closer, the Thames waves slapping against its hull. Small's boat was struggling, its engine sputtering under the treasure's weight. Watson glimpsed Tonga, reloading his blowpipe, his movements swift and precise, his eyes unreadable in the shadows. The islander was no mere servant, he was Small's weapon, bound by loyalty, forged in the Agra conspiracy. Holmes leaned forward, his voice a hiss. "Jones, cut them off at the bend. The river narrows there, they'll have nowhere to run." Jones nodded, steering hard, the launch veering toward a curve where the Thames tightened, flanked by looming warehouses. Small's boat swerved, its hull scraping a buoy, the lantern flickering as if sensing its master's panic. Watson's heart raced, the fog a suffocating veil, hiding Tonga's next strike. The story shifts, the river's roar fading to a memory of Baker Street, hours earlier, where Holmes had unraveled the case's heart. Mary Morstan sat before him, her hands clasped, her eyes bright with hope and fear. She'd handed Holmes a letter, its edges worn, its words hinting at a treasure and a betrayal. Holmes had studied it, his fingers tracing the ink, his mind weaving threads of murder and greed. "Small's the key," Holmes had said, his voice low. "He's killed to reclaim the treasure, but he's bound to it, like a man chained to a ghost. The river will be his reckoning." Mary's voice was soft but firm. "And my father? Was he part of this curse?" Holmes' gaze softened, a rare flicker of compassion. "Your father sought to break free, Miss Morstan. He paid the price, but we'll end this for him and for you." Watson had watched, torn between admiration and unease. Holmes' genius was a light in the darkness, but his choices, his willingness to let Small run, to trust the river's judgments, poke of a colder mind, one that saw justice as a game of chess, not mercy. The Thames roared back, the launch now nearly alongside Small's boat. The fugitive's face was a mask of fury, his knife slashing the air as he shouted over the engine's din. "You'll not have it, Holmes. It's mine by right." Holmes stood, his coat billowing, his revolver steady. "You're right, Small. It's a chain of death. Morstans, your comrades. Drop the sack, and you might live." Small laughed, a wild, broken sound. "Live in a cell. The treasures all freedom." Another hiss, another dart, this one striking the launch's helm, inches from Jones. The inspector cursed, ducking, but kept the course steady. Watson fired again, the bullet splintering Small's boat's rail. Tonga flinched his blowpipe, lowering for a moment, and Holmes seized the chance, leaping to the edge of the launch. "Watson, cover me," he shouted, his voice a command. Watson fired into the fog, keeping Tonga at bay as Holmes prepared to jump. The gap between the boats was narrow, the water churning below, a black maw ready to swallow them. "Holmes, it's madness," Watson yelled, his heart in his throat. "You'll fall." Holmes' eyes burned with resolve. "The river's wrath is ours, Watson. We end this now." But before he could leap, Small's boat lurched, its engine coughing as it hit a hidden snag. The sack of treasure slid, jewels spilling into the deck's shadows, and Small scrambled to save them, his knife forgotten. Tonga turned, his blowpipe aimed not at Holmes but at the water, as if the river itself were his enemy. Holmes froze, his mind racing. "He's protecting the treasure," he whispered. "Even now, it's all he sees." The launch closed in, the boats nearly touching, the Thames a roaring beast between them. Watson's revolver wavered, his eyes on Tonga, whose shadow seemed to blend with the fog. The chase was a dance with death, every moment a gamble, and Holmes was playing it with a gambler's nerve. The Thames roared beneath the colliding boats, its black waves clawing at the hulls as fog swallowed the lantern's glow. Sherlock Holmes balanced on the steam launch's edge, his eyes locked on Jonathan Small's fleeing craft, where the Agra treasures, jewels, spilled like cursed tears across the deck. Dr. John Watson gripped his revolver, his heart thundering, the shadow of Tonga's poisoned darts a constant threat in the mist. The chase was a dance with death. But another figure haunted Watson's thoughts, a woman whose quiet courage had set this deadly hunt in motion. Mary Morstan. Her name lingered in Watson's mind as the launch surged through the river's wrath, her pale face and steady voice a beacon in the darkness of this case. Hours earlier, in the firelit warmth of 221B Baker Street, she had sat before them, her hands clasped, her eyes bright with grief and resolve. She'd come seeking answers about her father's disappearance, her life touched by a mysterious treasure, and annual gifts of pearls. Holmes had listened, his sharp gaze softening, a rare crack in his armor. Watson had seen it, then a flicker of admiration, perhaps something more, that made the great detective vulnerable in a way no dart or killer could. The river's spray stung Watson's face as he shouted over the engine's roar, "Holmes, Small's slipping away. We can't let him take the treasure." Holmes' voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. "It's not the treasure, Watson. It's Mary Morstan. Small's path leads back to her, and that's where the danger lies." Watson's brow furrowed, his grip tightening on the rail. "Mary, she's safe, isn't she? Back at her lodgings, away from this madness." Holmes' eyes darkened, scanning the fog where Small's boat veered toward the distant bank. "Safe. No one tied to that treasure is safe. Small's desperation makes her a target. We end this tonight for her sake." The story shifts, the Thames fading to the soft glow of Baker Street, where Mary Morstan had first entered their lives. The room was warm, the fire crackling, but a chill hung in the air as she spoke. Her voice was calm, each word measured, yet heavy with loss. "My father, Captain Morstan, vanished 10 years ago," she said, her fingers tracing the edge of a pearl, one of 6, sent to her over the years. "He wrote of a great secret, a treasure that would change our lives. Then, nothing. Only these pearls, every year, like a ghost's promise. Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled, his gaze fixed on her. A treasure, he murmured. And a pact. Your father was entangled with dangerous men, Miss Morstan. Men who kill to keep their secrets. Mary's eyes met his, unflinching. I need to know, Mr. Holmes, was he a good man, or part of their crimes? I can bear the truth, whatever it is. Watson watched, his heart stirring. Mary's courage was quiet, not the blazing defiance of soldiers, but stronger for it. He saw Holmes' expression shift, a rare warmth, a respect that softened his sharp edges. You shall have your truth, Holmes said, his voice low. But it comes with danger. The men who hold this treasure will not hesitate to strike. Mary nodded, her face pale but resolute. I trust you, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson. Whatever it takes, I need to know. Watson had felt a pang then, a mix of admiration and fear. Mary was no damsel, but her quest had drawn them into a web of murder and greed. Holmes' interest in her was more than professional. Watson saw it in the way he lingered on her words, the way his usual detachment wavered. It was a crack in his armor, a vulnerability that could prove deadly in a chase as perilous as this. The Thames snapped back, the launch shuddering as it closed the gap with Small's boat. The fugitive's craft was faltering, its engine coughing, weighed down by the treasure's cursed bulk. Small stood at the tiller, his face twisted with fury, while Tonga crouched at the stern, his blowpipe raised. Watson's pulse raced, his eyes scanning for the glint of a dart in the fog. Holmes, Watson shouted, pointing. Tonga's aiming. Holmes spun, his revolver flashing as he fired, the shot splintering the enemy boat's rail. Tonga ducked, his blowpipe vanishing into the shadows. But Watson knew he'd reload. The islander was relentless, bound too small by an oath as deadly as the treasure itself. And Mary, Watson realized, was the thread that tied it all together. Her father's betrayal had sparked Small's vengeance, and her quest had brought them to this river. The launch veered, its hull grazing Small's boat, wood scraping wood. In a jarring screech, Holmes leaped to the edge, his coat billowing, his voice a command. Small, it's over. Drop the treasure, or the river takes you. Small's laugh was wild, his knife slashing the air. You want it for her, don't you, Morstan's girl? She'll get nothing but what her father deserved. Watson's blood boiled, his revolver raised. You'll not touch her, Small, he roared, firing a shot that sparked off the boat's hull. Small flinched, stumbling, but Tonga was a blur, his blowpipe glinting as another dart hissed through the fog. Watson ducked, the dart grazing the launch's mast, its poison a whisper of death. Holmes' eyes burned with focus, his mind a storm behind his calm. Watson, the boat, he shouted. Aim for the engine. Watson fired again, the bullet striking Small's boat, smoke curling from its sputtering engine. The craft slowed, lurching in the current, and Small cursed, his hands fumbling with the tiller. The treasure's sack slid, jewels scattering across the deck, their glow mocking his desperation. But Holmes' gaze was elsewhere, fixed on the fog where Tonga had vanished. He's gone to ground, Holmes said, his voice low. He'll protect Small to the last, but he knows the river's turning against them. Watson's heart sank, his thoughts racing to Mary. Holmes, if Small escapes, he'll go after her. He knows she's the reason we're here. Holmes nodded, his face grim. Which is why we can't fail, Watson. Miss Morstan's courage brought us here, and her safety depends on us." But his voice dropped, a rare note of doubt creeping in. "I've underestimated Small's resolve before. We must be certain." Watson stared at him, the river's roar filling the silence. He'd seen Holmes' cold justice on the pier, letting Small run to trap him. But now he saw something else, a flicker of fear, not for himself, but for Mary. Her quiet strength had touched Holmes, cracked his iron detachment, and that vulnerability was a new kind of danger. A man like Holmes, driven by logic, could falter when his heart stirred. The launch surged closer, the boats nearly touching, the Thames, a churning beast between them. Small's craft was failing, its engine coughing its last, but Tonga reappeared. His blowpipe raised, his eyes unreadable in the fog. Watson fired, the shot going wide, and Holmes grabbed his arm. "Steady, Watson," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "We need Small alive, for her." The boats collided, wood splintering as the launch rammed Small's hull. Small stumbled, the sack of treasure sliding toward the water's edge, and Watson saw his chance. He leaped across the gap, landing on Small's deck, his revolver aimed at the fugitive's chest. "Drop the knife, Small," Watson shouted, his voice steady despite the rocking boat. Small froze, his eyes wild, the treasure at his feet. Tonga turned, his blowpipe aimed, but Holmes was faster, his revolver trained on the islander. "One move, and it's over," Holmes said, his voice cold as the river. The standoff held, the Thames waves the only sound, until a faint clink broke the silence, a pearl rolling into the water, lost to the depths. The Thames roar faded as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson leaped from the steam launch onto a crumbling dock, their boots slipping on the slick timbers. The fog was a living thing, curling through London's docks like a thief, cloaking the city in secrets. Jonathan Small's boat had vanished into the mist, its engine's cough swallowed by the river. But the clink of the Agra treasure's jewels lingered in Watson's ears. Tonga's poisoned darts were still a threat, a whisper of death in the shadows. Holmes' face was grim, his revolver gripped tight, his eyes scanning the labyrinth of alleys that sprawled from the waterfront like veins of a sleeping beast. "Small's gone to ground," Holmes whispered, his voice low and sharp, cutting through the fog's damp weight. "But London's his trap, Watson. This city hides its killers, but it betrays them too." Watson's heart pounded, his revolver heavy in his hand. The standoff on the river had been a dance with death, and Mary Morstan's courage, her quest for her father's truth, had driven them into this underworld. "Holmes," he said, his breath clouding, "this place, it's a maze. Small could be anywhere, and Tonga's watching." Holmes' lips twitched, a flicker of a smile. "The city's a puzzle, Watson, and every shadow holds a clue. Small's desperation will lead us to him, and Tonga's loyalty will bind him close." The alley stretched before them, its cobblestones slick with grime, flanked by sagging warehouses and taverns, where gaslights flickered like dying stars. The air reeked of coal, smoke, and stale beer, the sounds of drunken laughter and clinking glasses spilling from open doors. Watson's nerves were taut, his war-honed instincts screaming danger. This was London's underbelly, a place where thieves and cutthroats thrived, and Holmes was plunging into it with the reckless focus of a man possessed. They moved swiftly, Holmes' long strides silent, his eyes darting to every doorway, every pile of crates. Watson followed, his revolver raised, scanning the rooftops where Tonga might perch. The memory of Mary's pale face in Baker Street haunted him, her quiet strength, her trust in them to unravel her father's fate. It was a predator, and they were its prey. The story shifts, the alley fading to a smoky tavern hours earlier, where Holmes had tracked a lead. The room was crowded, the air thick with tobacco and the stench of unwashed bodies. A one-eyed sailor slouched at a corner table, his fingers tracing a crude map scratched into the wood. Holmes had approached, his disguise a dockworker's cap and tattered coat making him a ghost among the crowd. "Word is," Holmes had said, his voice roughened to match the sailor's, "there's a man with a wooden leg carrying a fortune." "Seen him?" the sailor's eye narrowed, his voice a rasp. "Small, a slippery devil. Passed through last night, muttering about jewels and vengeance. Headed for the docks, but you didn't hear it from me." Holmes had slid a coin across the table, his gaze piercing, and his shadow, a small man, quick, deadly. The sailor's hand froze, his face paling. "I, the islander, moves like a rat, kills like a snake. You're mad to chase M. This city eats men like you." Holmes had smiled, a cold, knowing curve. It's tried before. The alley snapped back, the tavern's smoke replaced by the fog's chill. Holmes paused at a crossroads, his head cocked, listening. A faint thud echoed a wooden leg, unmistakable, from a side street. Watson's pulse quickened, his revolver steady, but the shadows seemed to shift, alive with menace. Tonga was out there, his blowpipe a silent reaper, and Small's treasure was a beacon drawing every rogue in London's underworld. "Holmes," Watson whispered, "this city, it's not just hiding Small, it's hiding 100 like him. Thieves, killers, all hungry for that treasure." Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning a broken window where a curtain twitched. "And that's our advantage, Watson. The city's greed will betray Small. Men talk, and talk leads to truth." They turned into the side street, its walls closing in, the cobblestones uneven underfoot. A figure darted across the path, a boy, ragged and barefoot, his eyes wide. "With fear, mister," he hissed, glancing back. "The limpin' man, he's in there." He pointed to a derelict tenement, its door hanging ajar, its windows black as coal. Top Holmes tossed the boy a shilling, his voice low. "Stay clear, lad. This is no place for you tonight." The boy vanished into the fog, and Watson felt a chill. "Holmes, it's a trap. Small's not alone, and this place reeks of danger." Holmes' gaze was unyielding, his revolver raised. "But Mary Morstan's truth lies beyond that door, and I'll not turn back." The air inside was stale, heavy with mold, and the faint metallic temps of blood. Watson's boots creaked on the warped floorboards, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. Barrels lined the walls, their lids pried open, revealing nothing but dust. But a faint clink, jewels, unmistakable, came from deeper within. Holmes moved like a cat, his steps silent, his revolver sweeping the shadows. Watson followed, his heart pounding, every creak a warning. The tenement was a warren of rooms, each one a potential ambush. Out for less. And Tonga, always Tonga, a shadow within shadows. A low voice echoed from a back room, harsh and desperate. Watson glimpsed him through a crack in the wall, his wooden leg braced against a table, the sack of treasure open before him. A hulking figure stood opposite a dockside thug, his knife gleaming, his eyes greedy. "You're done, Small," the thug growled. "Hand it over, or your fish food." Holmes signaled silence, his eyes narrowing. "The city turns on him," he whispered. "Greed's a blade, Watson, and it cuts both ways." Watson nodded, his revolver ready. But his thoughts raced to Mary. Her father had died in this web of greed, and now Small was caught in it. The treasure a curse that drew London's wolves. But Holmes' focus was unshaken, his mind a map of the city's secrets. Plotting every move, they crept closer, the floor groaning under their weight. Small's voice rose, a plea now. "Take half, man. There's enough for us all." The thug laughed, his knife flashing. "All, Small, or you join Morstan." Watson's blood ran cold, but before he could act, a hiss cut the air-poisoned dart, streaking from a darkened corner. The thug gasped, clutching his neck, and collapsed, his knife clattering to the floor. Tonga, the islander, emerged, his blowpipe lowered, his eyes locked on Small, who scrambled back, clutching the treasure. Holmes burst through the door, his revolver aimed. "Small, it's over," he shouted, his voice a whip crack. "Drop the sack." Small spun, his knife raised, but Tonga was faster, his blowpipe swinging toward Holmes. Watson fired, the shot splintering the wall beside the islander, who vanished into the shadows with a cat-like leap. Small seized the moment, bolting for a back door, the treasure dragging behind him. After him, Holmes roared, charging through the room. Watson followed, his boots pounding, the tenement's walls closing in. The city was a beast, its shadows hiding killers at every turn, and Small was its prey now, as much as they were. Mary's quest had led them here, but the underworld's hunger threatened to swallow them all. They burst into another alley, the fog thicker, the gaslights dim. Small's limping form was a blur ahead, the treasure's clink a fading echo. Watson's lungs burned, his revolver raised, but Holmes' voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. "He's heading for the river again," Holmes said, his eyes blazing. "The city's betrayed him, but he's not done, and neither are we." The fog clung to London's alleys like a shroud, the cobblestones slick with grime as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson raced through the city's underworld. The clink of Jonathan Small's treasure sack echoed faintly ahead, his wooden leg a desperate rhythm against the stones. The Thames' distant roar lingered in Watson's ears, a reminder of the chase that had brought them here, pursuing a killer and his cursed Agra treasure. Tonga's shadow loomed somewhere in the mist, his poisoned darts a silent threat. But another ghost haunted this night, not of flesh, but of flickering light, a lost tale of Holmes himself, captured on celluloid and swallowed by time. Holmes paused at a crooked intersection, his breath clouding in the chill air, his revolver gripped tight. His eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the darkness, but his voice carried a rare weight. "Small's running blind, Watson," he said, low and urgent. "The city's turning on him, but there's another story here, one that slipped through our fingers like so much fog." Watson's brow furrowed, his revolver raised, his heart still pounding from the tenement's deadly standoff. "Another story, Holmes. We're chasing a murderer, not a tale." Holmes' lips twitched, a fleeting smile. "Stories are clues, Watson, and this one a reel of film, lost to the ages hold secrets of our chase. A shadow of me, of us, Played out on a screen in 1923, the alley faded, the fog parting to reveal a different London, decades later, where gaslights had given way to electric glow. A cramped studio buzzed with the clatter of cameras, their lenses trained on a man who seemed born from Baker Street's firelight. Isle Norwood, his face sharp and hawk-like, stood as Sherlock Holmes, his coat billowing in a staged wind. The set was crude canvas backdrops painted with docks and alleys, but Norwood's eyes burned with the detective's fire. His every gesture a mirror of the man who now chased Small through the fog. The director, Morris Elvey, barked orders, his voice echoing over the crew. Norwood, more intensity. Your Holmes, facing death on the Thames. Small's boat. The prop, make it real. Norwood nodded, his jaw set, and leaped onto a mock boat, its wooden frame rocking under his weight. The scene was the Thames chase, a flicker of the novel's heart, but the danger was real. No stuntman stood by Norwood, insisted on the leap himself, his body straining as he balanced the camera's lens, drinking in every move. A rope snapped, the boat lurched, and Norwood nearly fell, his hand catching a rail at the last moment. The crew gasped, but he laughed, a sharp, reckless sound, as if death were just another clue. Again, Norwood called, his voice steady. Holmes wouldn't falter, and neither will I. The studio faded, the fog of 1890 swallowing the scene as Holmes and Watson crept through the alley. Watson's mind reeled, the image of Norwood's defiance blending with Holmes' own lost film. The sign of the Four was a ghost, its reels vanished, burned, stolen, or crumbled to dust. But its spirit lingered, a testament to a man who risked all to embody Holmes, just as Holmes risked all now to catch Small. Holmes, Watson whispered, his boots slipping on the cobblestones. How do you know of this film, this lost reel? Holmes' eyes flicked to him, glinting in the dim gaslight. Whispers, Watson, old papers, forgotten letters. Norwood was me, in a way, chasing shadows on a screen, as we chase them now. His Thames was wood and paint, but his danger was real. And it tells us Small's next move. They turned a corner, the alley narrowing, its walls sagging with decay. A faint clink came from ahead, Small's treasure, betraying his path. Watson's heart raced, the city's underworld, a maze of danger, its shadows hiding Tonga's blood. But Holmes' words stirred something else's sense of stories, echoing across time. Of Norwood's Holmes facing the same perils they did now. The story shifts again, to a darkened theater in 1923, where the film flickered on a silver screen. The audience leaned forward, their breath held as Norwood's Holmes leaped onto a boat, his eyes piercing the fog. The Thames chase unfolded in silence, save for a pianist's frantic notes, the camera capturing Norwood's reckless leap, his coat swirling like a cape. The scene was crude, the river a painted backdrop, but Norwood's intensity burned through, his Holmes a mirror of the novel's hero. Somewhere, Arthur Conan Doyle himself watched, his nod a quiet approval of the man who brought his detective to life. But the film was doomed. Reels went missing, lost in a fire, some said, or stolen by collectors hungry for its secrets. Norwood's performance, his risks, his embodiment of Holmes, faded into legend. A shadow as elusive as the treasure Holmes now chased. The alley snapped back, the fog thicker, the gaslights dim. Holmes paused by a derelict stable, its door ajar. The scent of straw and damp wood heavy in the air. A faint thud Watson raised his revolver, his nerves taut, the city's menace pressing in. The underworld was alive here, its thieves and killers drawn to the treasure's glow, and Tonga's darts could strike from any shadow. "Holmes," Watson said, his voice low, "this film, why does it matter? We're here, now chasing a real killer." Holmes' gaze was distant, as if seeing both past and present. "Because, Watson, that's a mirror." Norwood faced the Thames wrath on a stage, but his risks echo ours. Small's story, Mary's quest, this city, they're all part of a larger tale. One that doesn't end with a reel's last frame. They crept toward the stable, its doorway, a black void. Inside, a lantern's glow flickered, revealing Small, his face haggard, the treasure sack open at his feet. Jewels spilled across the straw, their light dancing on the walls. He clutched a knife, his eyes wild, muttering to himself, "Mine, it's mine, no one takes it." Holmes stepped forward, his revolver steady, his voice a whip crack. "It's over. Small, the treasures cursed you, and the city's turned. Drop the knife." Small spun, his knife flashing, his voice a snarl. "You, always you, Holmes, sniffing after my blood. You'll not have it, not for her, not for anyone." Watson's revolver snapped up, his heart pounding. Her meant Mary Morstan, her father's death, the spark of this chase. But before he could speak, a hiss cut the air, a poisoned dart streaking from the rafters. Holmes dove, pulling Watson down as the dart thudded into the wall, its tip glistening with poison. "Tonga!" Watson shouted, firing upward, the shot echoing in the stable's confines. A shadow leaped, swift and silent, vanishing into the darkness. Small seized the chance, grabbing the sack and stumbling toward a back door, his wooden leg dragging. Holmes sprang up, his coat swirling, his voice fierce. "After him, Watson. The city's his judge now, but will be its jury." They charged through the stable, straw crunching underfoot, the fog spilling in as they burst into another alley. Small's figure was a blur, the treasure's clink a fading echo. Watson's lungs burned, his mind racing with the ghost of Norwood. Holmes leaping, risking chasing a shadow on a screen. The city was a maze, its shadows a deadly puzzle, and Holmes was unraveling it, step by perilous step. The fog choked London's alleys, a gray veil that turned every shadow into a threat. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson sprinted through the narrow lanes, their boots pounding against the slick cobblestones. The echo of Jonathan Small's wooden leg, a fading pulse in the mist. Tonga's poisoned darts were a specter, their lethal hiss a memory that quickened Watson's heart. But Holmes' eyes burned with a relentless fire, his revolver gripped tight, as if the chase itself were a lifeline pulling him from the darkness within. Small's at his end. "Watson," Holmes panted, his voice sharp despite the strain. "The treasures, his noose, and the city's tightening it. We'll have him before dawn." Watson's lungs burned, his revolver heavy in his hand. "Holmes, this chase-it's nearly killed us. Tonga's still out there, and Mary Morstan. Safety hangs by a thread. How much longer?" Holmes' gaze flicked to him, a rare flicker of something human, exhaustion perhaps, or resolve. "As long as it takes, Watson, for her, for the truth. We've faced death before, and we'll cheat it again." The alley twisted, opening onto a derelict wharf where the Thames' black waters lapped at rotting piers. The fog was thinner here, the gaslights casting a sickly glow. Small's figure stumbled ahead, the treasure sack dragging his wooden leg a frantic thud against the boards. Watson glimpsed the fugitive's face, haggard, wild, a man consumed by the curse he'd chased across continents. The story shifts, the wharf's chill fading to the firelit warmth of 221B Baker Street, days earlier, where this tale of death had begun. Mary Morstan had sat before them, her quiet courage a spark that ignited Holmes' restless mind. Her father's disappearance, a deadly secret that threatened to claim him before any killer could. Watson had watched, torn between hope and fear, as Holmes' genius flared, his eyes tracing threads of murder and greed. This case, Holmes had said, his fingers steepled, is a tapestry of death, cocaine, darts, oaths, gold. Each thread could end us, Watson, but together they weave a truth we must unravel. Mary's voice had been soft, resolute. My father died for this truth, Mr. Holmes. If it's dangerous, so be it. I trust you to find it. Watson had seen it, crack in Holmes' armor, a rare admiration for Mary that made him more than a machine. It was a vulnerability, but also a strength, pulling him through the perils that followed. Tonga's darts on the Thames, the underworld's knives, the treasure's curse that turned men into monsters. The wharf snapped back, the Thames roar, a heartbeat in the fog. Small reached the pier's end, his boat gone, the river a black wall at his back. He turned, knife in hand, the treasure sack at his feet, its jewels spilling like blood across the boards. Holmes and Watson slowed, their revolvers raised, the air thick with the weight of the end. Small, Holmes called, his voice a blade. It's over. The treasure's claimed. It's Morstan, your comrades, nearly us. Drop the knife. Small's laugh was broken, his eyes wild. Over. You think you've won, Holmes. This treasure's my life, my blood. You'll have to kill me to take it. Watson stepped forward, his voice steady. Enough blood's been spilled, Small. For Mary Morstan's sake, end this now. Small's gaze flickered at Mary's name, a shadow of guilt crossing his face. Her father was a fool, he rasped, broke the oath, hid the treasure. I made him pay, and I'll not let his daughter have it. Holmes' eyes narrowed, his revolver unwavering. The words hung heavy. The Thames waves, a chorus of judgment. Watson's heart raced, his mind flashing through the dangers. They'd faced Holmes' syringe, a poison in his veins. Tonga's darts, a whisper of death. The underworld's greed, a city that devoured its own. Each had nearly claimed them, but Holmes had outwitted them all. His mind a light in the darkness. A faint hiss broke the silence, sharp and deadly. Watson's instincts flared, shoving Holmes aside as a dart streaked from the fog, striking the pier where he'd stood. Tonga, Watson shouted, firing into the mist, the shot echoing uselessly. Small seized the moment, lunging with his knife, but Holmes was faster, sidestepping and striking Small's wrist with his revolver. The knife clattered to the boards, and Small fell to his knees, the treasure sack tipping, jewels rolling into the Thames' hungry depths. Holmes stood over him, his face a mask of resolve. Your shadow can't save you now, Small. Where's Tonga? Small's breath was ragged, his eyes darting to the fog. He's loyal, Holmes, more than any of you. He'll kill you yet. Watson scanned the shadows, his revolver raised, but the fog was silent. Tonga's presence, a ghost. The islander's loyalty to Small was a deadly bond, forged in the Agra conspiracy. But the river seemed to have swallowed him, as it now swallowed the treasure. Pearls and diamonds sank, their glow fading, the curse's weight lifting, yet lingering. Holmes knelt, his voice low. "Your story ends here, Small. Tell me where's the rest of it? The treasure you hid, the truth you owe Mary Morstan." Small's head bowed, his voice a whisper. "It's gone, most of it. What's left is in the river, or with Tonga. I kept my oath, Holmes. That's more than Morstan did." Watson's heart sank, thinking of Mary, her hope for answers, her trust in them. The treasure was lost, but the truth was theirs. Her father's death, the oath's betrayal, Small's vengeance. Holmes had cheated death to find it, outwitting every peril. But Watson saw the cost in his friend's eyes, a weariness, a shadow of the syringe's lure. Holmes stood, signaling to Inspector Jones, who emerged from the fog with constables, their lanterns cutting through the mist. "Take him," Holmes said, his voice flat. "The law will judge him now." Small was hauled to his feet, his hands bound, his eyes fixed on the river where his treasure had vanished. Watson watched, torn between justice and pity. Small was a killer, but the treasure's curse had broken him, as it had broken so many. Holmes, though, stood apart, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, his legend forged in this night's triumphs. The story shifts one last time to a flickering screen where Isle Norwood's Holmes faced a painted Thames, his leap a defiance of death. The 1923 film, Lost to Time, had captured this spirit. Holmes as a man who outwitted fate, from cocaine's grip to assassin's blades. Later adaptations, their colors bright and voices clear, echoed the same truth. Holmes endured, a shadow who walked through death and emerged whole. The wharf's fog thickened, the constables' lanterns fading as they led Small away. Watson turned to Holmes, his voice soft. "We did it, Holmes. Mary's safe, the truth's hers. But Tongahee's still out there." Holmes' gaze was distant, fixed on the river. "Tonga's a shadow, Watson, and shadows fade. But the truth," he paused, a faint smile breaking through. "The truth is ours, and it's enough." Watson nodded, the weight of their journey settling in his bones. Holmes had faced death in a dozen forms, his own demons, Tonga's darts, Small's knife, London's underworld, and emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. The man who cheated death was more than a detective. He was a legend, carved from the dangers he'd outrun.